Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Hoff on the Mully and Haugh Show on 670 The Score. Dan Wiederer is from the Chicago Tribune covering the Bears, and this is draft week. We have found ourselves finally in the midst of draft week, days away from the Bears changing the course of their franchise. We can talk about what's at stake, Dan. We've been talking about how big this is, and here we are on the brink. And I think, obviously, Caleb Williams will go first. There's going to be a lot of speculation about who will go ninth, but this is fun because we are days away.
Yeah, we're days away, and we're heading into this process with a whole lot of clarity, which is very rarely the case, and may never be the case again here in Chicago with the number one overall pick, a quarterback who they've clearly grown very comfortable with, and that marriage is headed to the altar on Thursday night in Detroit. I'll be headed to Detroit for the I guess the rehearsal dinner a couple days early. I know Caleb Williams is expected to speak on Wednesday at a Play 60 event in town, along with the dozen other prospects that are expected to be in attendance there. So it should be a good process, I think, now of us crossing that bridge of getting to know Caleb Williams a little better, which we've obviously been trying to pick away at little by little over the last 3 months.
So we have been picking away little by little, and we'll get into his interview, which I thought was very revealing with Ryan Clark on the Pivot podcast, because it was as good of a glimpse of who he is and what the Bears are getting as I think that we have heard from him audibly. I also think that I want to begin with looking at your deep dive into what the Bears are prepared to do to make it an environment conducive to winning and success for him, as you wrote in Sunday's Chicago Tribune. Dan, I thought that was it was a good, and long summary of what exactly the Bears have done or tried to do to get to this point, and what why maybe people need to understand that they're ready for this. And I think if they're not, they're never going to be. But I really thought that it came through that the Bears have prepared for this opportunity in a way that makes you feel confident that I almost like chuckle saying, like, they can handle Caleb Williams.
Well, look, like I told you when I was down in Orlando for the league meetings, that I just had a sense from being around Ryan Poles, from being around Kevin Warren, from talking to George McCaskey and Matt Eberflus. Really, you just sense that Ryan has had a handle on where he's wanted to go with a lot of different things for a long time. And I really do appreciate his calm confidence and his ability to articulate it in a way that makes you understand his approach to things and what he's looking for and how he's looking to not just make a pick, but to make a pick. And as you mentioned, set that pick up for an ideal level of success. Now, I'll be honest with you, I still have some questions. I still don't know whether the nest, as some people would call it, that's around Caleb Williams is entirely suitable to launching him to new heights. But I think also some of this bet here is that Caleb Williams is going to launch himself to new heights, and that they'll be able to go along for that ride with him. I think in the story that I wrote for Sunday's Tribune that you mentioned, it was just kind of I guess a deeper look at what the Bears are signing up for and what Caleb Williams is signing on to be a part of, and now how that's going to mesh. We'll chronicle that from here. But obviously we're able to go forth from this point forward, knowing that, again, that union's taking place this week.
What still concerns you about the Bears from that perspective? I understand it's almost like you spend enough time around the team covering the Bears, and it's inherent cynicism, and it's kind of earned and appropriate. But I just wonder what have they not done adequately enough in your mind, or do you think gives you still a little bit of a pause?
No, I just think there's some leap of faith, psychology here to some of this, because look, like, you have to make sure that questions that weren't adequately answered in January don't just get brushed aside because we get lost in the excitement for the talent and the potential that Caleb Williams brings to the table. If I asked you right now to tell me the last season that Matt Eberflus will coach the Chicago Bears, I don't know what number you'd give me. Like, what year would you give me that he's going to get to at least 2026? Is he going to get to at least 2000? So I think there's a lack of clarity with a defensive-minded coach who hasn't yet checked the boxes, proving himself to all of Chicago and the rest of the league that he's the guy that's going to be able to lead them to multiple championships. Along with that, I think you zoom out on the quarterback's room, and you're taking a leap of faith in Shane Waldron. You're taking a leap of faith in Kerry Joseph. You're taking a leap of faith in Thomas Brown. You're taking a leap of faith in your guy, Brett Rippon. And so there's many leaps of faith that are needed here.
So, okay, that's interesting because I'm thinking about this as you're talking, and the comparisons will be lofty to Caleb Williams coming to Chicago, coming to the Bears, and it will be for sports fans in the city. They'll be told that this is as big as Chris Bryant to the Cubs, Tays and Kane to the Blackhawks, Michael Jordan maybe even to the Bulls, and in those situations I reference and Mark, let's go Frank Thomas to the White Sox. Okay, all kinds of things, and I'm referencing championship scenarios because let's face it, you're doing this why? To win a championship. I don't think you need to win 8 like Caleb Williams projected, but you want to win a championship. You'll be a legend forever. And I think that when you ask that question specifically about Matt Eberflus, I don't get too caught up on that because I think that we want everything to happen immediately. We want to project into like, could this work to win a Super Bowl in 2024 or 2025, or will he be here in 2026? All the other examples that I cited as I went through them in my head, like the coaches,
they become insignificant.
They're insignificant. Kane and Tays were playing for Dennis Savard when they came into the league. He got fired. Joe Quenneville, they win a cup. Michael Jordan, how many coaches did he go through before he was ready to ascend?
Dan Albeck, Doug Collins.
You know the history.
Jackson.
We all know it by heart. I mean, Frank Thomas and with the White Sox, and Chris Bryant for Ricky Renteria. Then he was Renteria'd as it became a verb in Chicago. Joe Madden was the coach. So I think at some point in time, you do understand that the realities of pro sports, the coaches are always more interchangeable than the superstars. And Caleb Williams is coming here to be a superstar, and I'm not really too caught up on who the head coach is right now.
Well, look, and that's why you push your chips in, because you believe that this player can elevate everyone around him, regardless of some of the infrastructure that's around him. What I'm saying, just as a slight counter argument, is you just want to make sure that you're not rebooting a year from now, right? Like, I think that's Chicago's greatest fear, is you're going to do the same thing that you did with Mitch, the same thing you did with Justin, the same thing you did in some ways with Jay Cutler when he played with 6 play callers in 8 seasons time here in Chicago. And you just don't want that constant churn and that constant turnover. But I'm glad that you articulated that point, because I do think that if you get a star is going to be a star. And they're going to find a way to rise above all that. And hopefully we don't have to worry about that and spend, Novembers and Decembers of lost seasons going, oh God, how could they have done this better? Look how badly they wronged him, this and that, and we look back on this and we go, yeah, the guy was a star. It was a no-brainer pick. And thank God they made it instead of trying to get cute.
Thank God they made it instead of trying to get cute. And thank God the season will suddenly matter more than the off season, because enough of that stuff.
I'll say this. One thing that was interesting to me in some of the feedback to my story was you never know what, particularly out of a long write like that people are going to glom onto. And I got a lot of feedback on the finishing chapter about Mason Poles, Ryan Poles' son, who's I believe his 11th birthday is on Tuesday of draft week, which is a nice way to celebrate a birthday. Hey kid, we got you a new quarterback. You're just gonna have to wait till Thursday to get him. But so look, like Ryan was very forthright in saying that Mason was heartbroken when they traded Justin Fields. He had, like much of Chicago, really enjoyed watching Justin play. Unlike much of Chicago, he had a relationship with Justin Fields. He knew him firsthand. He dressed as him for Halloween. He would go to Hallis Hall and pass him in the hallway, and they could have conversation. And so he was crushed when Justin Fields was sent to Pittsburgh. And then I, at one point, just asked Ryan, I said that, as you were trying to sell him on why this decision made sense, did you eventually just send him to the fifth graders paradise, which is YouTube, and tell him to look up Caleb Williams highlights? And he said, indeed I did. And now Caleb is his background screen on his phone. And so for me, that was it, right? Like, welcome to Chicago. Here's a case study in how to turn the page. Go watch some YouTube highlights, get excited, and put the guy on your phone.
I mean, you did a lot of great reporting and picking what to accentuate and all those things, but that was the best part. I mean, that was the most memorable part. Is like, if, it's almost like, you think if this 11-year-old kid can find a way to get over Justin Fields, certainly the Grabowski who sits in the upper deck and a guy who had the poster and the devotion and called the score 5 days a week to say that Justin Fields deserves to be the starter, those guys can get over it too, because it's time. It's inevitable. that seems like such a long time ago. The end of the regular season seems like it was last year. It just is crazy. So we are on the brink of evaluating Caleb Williams in real time in Chicago, at Lake Forest, at Hallis Hall. He could be there as early as Friday, potentially. And so that brings us to, what exactly are we going to hear? Who is the young man we're going to meet? And what is his personality like? I think we'll start out with just a 3-minute chunk from the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark, who I thought was definitely on top of his game. He's a tremendous interviewer. He's really made the transition well into the media from his NFL career. He also has the gravitas that not a lot of us have. He has a Super Bowl ring, and I think that guys like Caleb Williams respect that more than they would your typical interview. And Caleb Williams addressed exactly what was going on, what it means to him to be going number one overall, and what some of his goals will be.
Speculation and people try to make it, somebody else might go number one. We've known this the entire time, right? Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears trade away Justin Fields. On that day, when that happens, what's your first thought?
I was in the car. I was driving to a business meeting, and I'm listening to music, bobbing my head. I probably got on Drake, and I'm chilling. I'm in West Hollywood area, driving to a business meeting, and all I see is my phone explodes. Whether it's actual just regular fans or whether it's ESPN, whether it's whatever the case may be, and I pick up my phone and it's going off, and I'm trying to figure out what just happened, because it went from just nothing and maybe a couple of texts to just like phone just doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. I end up calling a couple of people, and it's just like well, we know where their mind and heart is at this instance. Let's prepare, get ready, and handle things accordingly, and still do our due diligence on the situation and things like that. But in that moment, it was just like, it was kind of like, wow, because I didn't do my top 30 visit yet. They didn't have my medicals and things like that. So they have it all now, but it's nothing. But it was and I had a good time in my top 30. But yeah, it was interesting right then in that moment, because it was just so unexpected in that instance.
The most, I don't say pressure. You're just so cool. So I don't want to say the pressure of it, but just different times coming off the Heisman season, going to the next season, or transferring, having to, I would say prove yourself at USC, or now jump to that next level. Like the pressure on you or the excitement, I would say, from you, at what level is the biggest one, or where was that time when you might have been up a little late at night, or you were just like, I got to get this?
I set my goals. I set my season goals every year, and then I set my long-term goals. Other than that, I mean, chasing those things or trying to get those things don't bother me or cross my mind as much. Whether that's the way I walk, the way I talk, how I act, how I treat people. And then how I get on that field and how it's a different person. That's kind of how I go about it. So I don't, the gotta get all those things. Like I set number one number one on my list a long time ago. And once I hit them or once I pass them and can't do them again, I remove them, and once I achieve them or once I pass them.
Your list is your screensaver?
Yeah, my list is my screensaver, and
can I see it?
Yeah, my everyday screensaver. I have a few other ones on here.
He's way more focused than I ever was.
He's way more focused than you are now.
That's a great way to end it. So Dan, how many times have you been in an interview with anybody and asked them to show you their screensaver on their phone?
Right. I mean, it's not often. And what I was going to say is there was a clear comfort established in that interview. And for those who haven't listened to it, I would advise you to go listen to the entirety of it, because it's over an hour. It's almost 80 minutes, where I feel like you really get to know Caleb Williams, David. And my first chance to have an audience with Caleb was in that massive horde setting at the Combine in Indianapolis. And I was just curious to see how he would kind of navigate those waters. Totally different setting, obviously. But I was impressed that day back in February. And I remember, I guess that was March 1st. And you and I talked about that at the time, that like just how at ease he seemed, how comfortable he seemed, and that seems to be part of his wiring. And the more I've had exposure third hand through some of these things, you get a real sense that not only is Caleb Williams authentic, but he's very self-confident, right? And unapologetically self-confident in a way that I think is going to help him survive in the landscape he's about to come into, where he's going to take arrows. I mean, you and I know very well that quarterbacks in Chicago are going to take arrows at some point. And I think they're going to bounce off him. I definitely feel more so that way than I did in late January when I started doing some of the background digging on how teams were trying to figure out who he was and what his DNA was. And I think in this interview and that clip you just played, you get some of that just that self-confidence that is very, very, infectious and contagious.
It is, and you don't want there to be too many heavy doses of that. You want to have a balance. You don't want to come across as too confident before you've earned it. I think he understands that and seems like a very smooth communicator, and with a very easy confidence. It's not on the surface very overbearing, and he does seem better equipped. And I've said this before, and it bears repeating. We're talking about a professional athlete coming into a professional sports setting.
Right.
Caleb Williams is not like other quarterbacks that have come into the NFL. Frankly, I think he's sort of the first wave of the NIL athlete. He's worth millions of dollars before he signs his first NFL contract, and with that comes a lot of the celebrity. With that has come a lot of the reality of being a professional athlete and being in that situation. So this is not going to overwhelm him. I don't think that any moment is going to be too big for him, and you start to hear that when the more you listen to what he has to say. So he also talked about, obviously, his goals of winning a championship. And this is how he sounded about helping Chicago with what he said and how he termed it his care.
About the number one pick, Keenan Allen, who is now a Chicago Bear, was at your pro day.
Yeah.
DJ Moore played extremely well last year. Cole Kmet, Ryan Poles, and the Chicago Bears have tried, at least and to me, succeeded in making Chicago a place that has the requisite pieces to have a young quarterback be successful. If that is the case, if and when, I think when we hear Caleb Williams' name called first, how does he help Chicago win its first championship since 1985?
85 Bears. One is through my care, bringing the community and showing my care for all three levels of, for myself of ball, for my teammates, and then for the community that makes game days, the game, everything, the city lively and fun and enjoyable and all of that. And that's kind of three things is care. Care goes a long way. Places that love football, places that care about football, places that have the same goals and aspirations in mind.
Was that in reference, do you think, is that the way he always talks, Dan, or is that a nod to his foundation, which is Caleb Cares, and a way to get that messaging out in a different context?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure. It's like a chicken and egg thing, right? Did that foundation get its name because of the way he speaks in that vein, or was it vice versa? I'm not sure on that front, but I again, like, that's another clip there, and tell me if you disagree, where you just feel purpose behind the things that Caleb Williams says, and it's a good thing. Now, look, like, there's other parts of that interview where he's talking about running down Tom Brady and winning 8 Super Bowls, and there's a part of me that if I'm inside the building at Hallis Hall, I want to say, okay, like, look, like, subscribe to the big goal, little goal philosophy. That's a great big goal to have. Now there's 175 little goals that need to be taken care of in the first year of your job as QB1 of the Chicago Bears in 2024 that need to be checked before you even start dreaming about 8 Super Bowls. And so if you can compartmentalize and see the big goal, but also understand how to take care of the little goals, then you can go there. I don't like to see ambition just be kind of a naive set a grand target and then it's just words, right? Because we know how unrealistic it is for him to run down Tom Brady. If he won 1 Super Bowl in Chicago, the 85 Bears won 1 Super Bowl. They're the most iconic team in Chicago sports history by winning 1 Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So you don't need to win 5. You don't need to win 3. If you win 1 here, you're going to have a statue. Okay.
I said that. Yeah, I said that in the morning show on Mully and Haugh. I appreciate the ambition and how
But
lofty.
chill.
But you don't have to be here 20 years. You don't have to win 8. If you win 1, you are a legend in Chicago. And then
Yeah.
let's talk about the second one, because then it could be realistic. 20 years is a long time. If you're here a good 8, then let's talk about longevity. Because if you're here 8, that means that you're doing something right, and that would mean you're going to continue to want to stay and do some more. So I think yes.
Peyton Manning won 2, right? And the
Yeah.
last one was when he was down to his final disc in his vertebrae late in his career in Denver, surrounded by a defense. So Aaron Rodgers has won 1, and that's his idol, right? Like, it's one of his idols. Brady and Rodgers are the guys he talks about extensively. So I originally heard that clip, and I was just like, it was an eye roll clip that you see on social media, and you're like, all right. Then you listen to the 75 minutes of the interview, and you go, I like listening to this dude talk. And I had a conversation with Colleen Kane on Monday morning as we're kind of getting ourselves aligned, not only for draft week, but for the month and a half that follows it. Just talking about how there's depth to Caleb Williams that wasn't there with either Mitch Trubisky or Justin Fields. He has a level of introspection. There's layers to his personality that it's like, it's going to be compelling to be around him. And in my job, it's great. In your job, it's great. It's going to be interesting, at all times. And then someone else said to me, yeah, and don't forget, he's also famous, which is another part of this equation, is that he is already famous. He's very well established and known in the sporting world, to the point where we're going to have to be ready for every single interview he does to be hyper-analyzed, aggregated, picked for nuggets. And it's just that's the existence that's going to be Caleb Williams in Chicago with the Bears.
Before we move on, he seems to have a knack for, he's one of those guys you think he's going to let he's going to let you in just a little bit. He might let some people in a little more, but you're going to be intrigued by how far he lets you go and how much he reveals. And even if it's a little at a time, you're going to want to know more. And that is, he's got a very compelling personality, and he does have some depth. That's a good way to put it. Finally, I think we have somebody in this role that is the center of attention in a sports city like Chicago, that might deserve it and might be able to command it.
Yeah, well, and so 2 things to that. And number one, I had a good relationship with both Mitch and Justin, and Mitch was just, he was just Mitch. He's just kind of like a boring dude from Ohio. I hate to say that in those terms, but there weren't these complicated layers to his existence or his climb. Justin was described from day one that he got to Halas Hall as a little bit robotic in a good way. People loved the fact that he could just turn into that worker that could just, flip a switch on his brain and just grind, but that was, you saw him many times get up behind a microphone or a dais and seem totally disengaged, right? And you just be like, okay, well, we're not going to get anywhere. With Caleb, I think we're going to get somewhere every time we get an opportunity to talk to him. And I'm hopeful that our market and our beat knows how to handle that, knows how to take advantage of that in a way that is truly that has depth to it. The other point I was going to make is I've compared this to LeBron James many times over the last 3 months, and I do think there is a level of that where the way he talks is going to bother a segment of the population. They're going to be annoyed by him the way there is a segment of the population that is constantly annoyed by LeBron James, right? You're going to have your fanatics and you're going to have your haters. And in the middle, there's going to be a pretty good size of the audience. But that's part of this as well. Every interview he does, there's going to be people that just go hard eye roll on it and go, oh, right, just win football games, dude,
Right.
But so that's going to be part of the existence, is that kind of that larger than life, every word you say is going to take on meaning that it's going to be fascinating to cover.
Polarizing is the word, and I think relevance is what we're going to get from everything he says and pretty much everything he does. So plenty more ahead for the Caleb Williams watch this week as we wait for Thursday night around 7:15 Chicago time, when they take him off when they hand in the card.
Yeah, theoretically, I'll get a chance to talk to him 3 days in a row: Wednesday in Detroit, Thursday in Detroit, and Friday at Halas Hall. So awesome. Away we go.
Away we go.
Hopefully we go.
So let's talk briefly about the stadium project, which you wrote about a week ago Sunday, and it was a big story on the front of the Tribune. And the comparisons to other cities like Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Las Vegas, and what's ahead for the Bears, who could be, according to your sources, maybe unveiling some of their ideas and launching some of their plans this week.
There's been some buzz in that regard, David. And the story you referenced, you can find at chicagotribune.com. Myself, Colleen Kane, and Bob McCoppin from the news side combined on that to kind of give a glimpse into some of the things the Bears are envisioning and how it compares to some of these other stadiums in the last 20 years that have launched. The one thing we're waiting on is specifics and details and plans. And it's our understanding that pretty soon there's going to be renderings. Pretty soon there's going to be a video, a brochure. There's going to be some opportunity to ask questions and find out what all the Bears are envisioning down on the museum campus now that they've pivoted away from Arlington Heights. To your question specifically now, why this week? I have no idea. If they did it this week, it would, to me, register as a little bit misguided, given that the entire Chicago fan base wants to immerse itself in the draft this week and just really live there. Let it breathe. Let it breathe. Let the drafting of Caleb Williams and the number 9 pick in the 2024 draft class breathe. And then next week you can come out with
savor it.
Yeah, like
savor the good news
and sell it. And maybe there's a plan here to compare the two, or like marry the two together and figure out a way to drum up the interest. But the timing of that presentation won't be as important as the details that come out of it. And there's a lot, I'm sure I'm sure you have a lot of questions that you want satisfied before you go, okay, yeah, just build a $3 billion stadium on the lakefront. And oh, by the way, let's see if we can get some of Chicago to foot the bill for it.
I am very curious about those details. And I do wonder cynically if in fact they do release renderings or a plan this week, it will cause me to question whether or not they're trying to take advantage of the wave of enthusiasm and the distracted fan base and media to slip some things through the cracks, and to maybe there's a plan that deserves more scrutiny than it will get in a week where everybody's intoxicated with the possibility of Caleb Williams and the number 9 pick. If you're doing this, the public relations strategy is a big part of the unveiling. It has to be. Messaging matters. And I think that if your determination is that the best time to send a message about what you plan to do on the lakefront, if that's indeed what we're getting, the renderings of the dome, I think it's a terrible idea to do it this week when we're anticipating the biggest draft the Bears have had in a very long time. So I wouldn't get it. And I think that any bit of criticism they would receive about the timing of it would be warranted.
I don't disagree with you on any of that. I would tell you that one of the bigger achievements that Ryan Pace had in his time as general manager was getting the addition put on Haugh Hall, and the I don't remember what the cost of that expansion was at Haugh Hall, where they built 2 new practice fields and added on to the north side of the building and put a facility next to the Peyton Center for events and other things. And they rolled that announcement out on a Friday evening at like 6:00, where, as you know, in our field, that's known as the Friday news dump, where you try to get rid of bad news, and bury it as people head into the weekend. And that was one of those ones where everyone that got that press release was like, what are they doing? Like, this is exciting news. And they just lost it on a Friday night, and they never really got the attention they deserved for what they did to Haugh Hall. You talk to people that have been at Haugh Hall before that edition and people afterwards, and they're like, holy cow, like, I never knew how much of an improvement they had made to this facility. And I don't know that they milked that for as much as it was worth to them.
As we speak, Dan, and we're doing this on Monday afternoon, and we'll drop it when we drop it, but media advisory has come across, and the Chicago Bears will announce plans for a new stadium and additional green and open space on the museum campus, and they'll do this Wednesday, April 24th. With the NFL world focused on Detroit, the Bears are going to drop these plans for what to do on the lakefront. The Chicago Bears, in collaboration with city officials and stakeholders, will host a press conference on Wednesday, April 24th, to announce their plans for a state-of-the-art, publicly owned, enclosed stadium, along with additional green and open space with access to the lakefront for families and fans on the museum campus.
I'm getting my inter-office alerts on my phone right now talking about that as well, sounding like it'll be early afternoon, possibly around noon. And that's about the same time that I will be at a Play 60 event in Detroit talking to Caleb Williams and pumping out quotes from Caleb Williams.
Send back to your inner office memos that get the editorial board on these guys. Like, this is ridiculous that you have a message that you want to send that you're proud of, and you're doing it 24 hours before the biggest draft pick that you're going to have since you drafted Brian Urlacher and Devin Hester. This is not. They did all of these moves for all of these PR changes that they wanted to introduce, and the big brains are in the building. Really? Whose idea was this?
Congratulations to the 7:00 hour of the Mully and Haugh show for Tuesday morning, where you guys obviously have got a topic that's going to be able to carry you for an hour. And then, obviously we're in agreement here that it probably would have been smarter to time this next week. Maybe they are trying to strategically squeeze a few things by, but with the story that we did a week and a half ago, that there are some questions I have. Like, Minneapolis is where Kevin Warren worked. It's where he was the COO at the time that US Bank Stadium finally got off the ground and was built and opened. And, that would be his experience and his background and his ability to use that as a model. Now, I talked to the former mayor up there, RT Ryback, who was a big part of convincing some people in the city council that it was worth making this investment in a public-private partnership to be able to enliven that part of downtown with something that had not just a stadium, but brought back some of that area of downtown that had gone kind of dead and silent over the lifespan of the Metrodome. And one of the things that he said is that they quickly realized that there was a need to build community around that stadium. And so that came with housing in the area. It came with new business offices with a plaza down there that could make that happen. My big question about the museum campus is, one, what are the restrictions you're going to face in terms of things that you're able to add to that campus, which seems like it could be pretty significant. And two, how do you go about, forget the infrastructure stuff. We'll get to that later because that's a huge part of this conversation, but how do you bring other things into that area? There's a lot of space to use, but how do you get it so that you can weave community in through there so that people will go there at times when there's not an event there? And I can't really get a feel for what would attract me as a citizen or a potential consumer to just go down there. And they're going to have to answer those questions on what they envision down there.
The lake. I mean, that's it.
It's a big lake. You can go a lot of other places on the lake.
I know.
Right?
It's like the lake. I walked by Soldier Field and I stared into the lake and pondered the meaning of life. I don't know what it is. The pedestrian walkway to Northerly Island.
You're going to need to have some entertainment there, right? Like it's 3 restaurants, and one of them is a takeout place. Something's got to be a draw. You're going to have, I know there is a vision to, if you do tear down the stadium at Soldier Field, keep the colonnades and build something inside there where you have playing fields that are not only accessible to youth sports, but eventually become potentially maybe a destination for, as youth sports meccas where you can host various tournaments and flag football games and soccer matches and things like that. You got to find something. And obviously they're going to unveil some of these plans on Wednesday. And by the end of the week, we'll have more time to talk about it, or will we? Because we'll be so focused on talking about the draft class that we won't be able to give this its attention.
It makes me immediately like, I don't want to say suspicious, but why are they doing this now? It makes you as a longtime career journalist or whatever, it makes you more skeptical of what they're trying to sell, because it feels like they're trying to. This is something that they should be proud of. This is something that it should be more complete, and I just don't think that this shows a whole lot of foresight, a whole lot of perceptiveness to do this the day before the NFL draft, which is one of the biggest days on the NFL calendar, especially this year, especially now.
Right. Yeah. And look, like, again, there's layers to this. We could talk about how, one of the things that I didn't realize, honestly, when I started reporting this particular story, I didn't realize that Jerry World was a private public partnership. Just had never looked into it personally. And then when you learn that and you're like, okay, well, Jerry Jones didn't need the public help and obviously could have owned all that land himself and still made a pretty good penny, but they've obviously found a way to make it work where it's worthwhile to the Cowboys to have that arrangement where they pay rent, they pay part of the naming rights fees to the city of Arlington. And there's an agreement worked out, and that agreement between the Bears and the city of Chicago will have to be very detailed and very spelled out for people to understand it. The other stadium that we talked about in our piece was Indianapolis, which has obviously become a destination for big events. Well, this was an interesting nugget because Kevin Warren had made special note that a Sports Business Journal piece that came out earlier this spring did not have Chicago not only in the top 25 of cities in terms of their ability to attract sporting events, but wasn't even on the list of ones to watch. And so when you look at Indianapolis, they are going to, this was an interesting nugget, David, that they're going to host the Olympic swimming trials in Indianapolis over 9 days inside Lucas Oil Stadium. And I said, wait a second, they don't have a pool inside Lucas Oil Stadium. They're going to build pools to put in there. And so that begs the question of like, what, number one, it gives you an idea of like, if you're willing to get creative on whatever event could be in there and think anything, you can make it happen. They're going to put a pool in Lucas Oil Stadium and have 9 days of swimming trials in there. And then the second question is what's that worth to a city? Like, obviously Indianapolis feels like the ability to, in that particular case, attract a bunch of people from that community to their town and get people to stay in their rooms and dine in their downtown is worthwhile. And then if you can get 10 to 12 to 15 events that aren't Colts games, and then you attract the Final Four and you get these mega concerts, well, now all of a sudden you have sort of that water wheel effect where you can constantly churn business and economic impact. I'm not wise enough as an economist to know what that ultimately does for a city, but clearly in Indianapolis, they feel like they've found a sweet spot enough so that they're going to build pools and stick them inside Lucas Oil Stadium.
Cannot wait for the Lakeshore Drive Iditarod. Somehow work out how they can do that inside the dome that will be the Lakefront Stadium, the George S. Hallis Dome, or whatever they will do for naming rights. Okay, well, there's a lot more to figure out when they have this Wednesday press conference, and I just been aghast at how they have committed so many resources to reshaping their public relations team, and now the first public relations team mission seems to be like a very strange one. So the more things change, the more they stay the same at Hallis Hall as it regards the PR mission.
Here's the good news for our audience. We're going to try to get at you just about every day this week. You know, tomorrow we'll have more content after Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham meet the media. On Wednesday, you now have a stadium press conference in addition to Caleb Williams speaking to media in Detroit. On Thursday, by the way, first round of the draft, I bet there'll be some things to talk about that night. So our content's exploding, no matter how upset and disturbed you are right now and how well you're going to take that to the airwaves on Tuesday morning.
That's the only thing exploding right now, Dan. Man, okay, you're right. Our content is exploding. I cannot wait for the rest of this week because it has to get better after today. No, it's good. It's all good. And the draft is always a lot of fun. And we'll talk about the 9th pick maybe tomorrow as we kind of get going here on draft week, because it is a very, very fun time. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, like I say, this feels like a week we've been waiting for, and here we're in it. And yeah, I'm excited to do everything that you're hired into this job to do, you know, but both in print and on the podcast here. There's a lot to cover and a lot of thoughts and reporting to do. So it's fun.
You can find us, as always, on the free Odyssey app. You can watch us on 670 The Score's YouTube page, and we will be back with almost a pod every day this week because there's things happening, and this is the week that you've been waiting for, and the Take the North podcast will be here for you. For Adam Sadinsky and Dan Wiederer, I'm David Haugh. We will talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.